Calvary Fresno. Checking to see if anyone's on yet. Giving it a few seconds. If it's working, there it is working. Hello, Calvary Fresno. My name is Andrea Enos, and I'm sure you've seen me many times talking to our Impact kids, wearing crazy costumes and anything I can do just to teach kids about God. I love it. But tonight I actually get the privilege to chat with you. So I'm very excited about that. So tonight I wanted to talk about faith in it. And 2020 has definitely been it's been a very interesting year. And it's been full of challenges, and I think we are all starting to feel that. Even though it's September and we're almost done with the year, I mean, we're just feeling the challenges of 2020. It's been such a challenging year that 2020 actually has its own meme. So I wanted to share some of those with you. This one, if 2020 was a bag of chips, that's really gross. If 2020 was a donut, that's definitely not a donut I would want to hear. I would want to eat it. If 2020 was a hula hoop, and if 2020 was a scented candle. So needless to say, 2020 has been pretty stinky. It has not been the best of years. We have faced our challenges through these years. So what I would like to do is talk to you about a man who has faced challenges and he faced it. He absolutely walked in faith and faithed it. So we're going to turn to Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to talk a little bit about Abraham. So if you go to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, we're going to talk about Abraham. The Lord had said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all of the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So in Genesis 12, we see that God gave Abraham a blessing, a promise, and we see how he gave Abraham an action. He said, "Go." And in Genesis chapter 12, verse 4, we see that it says right at the beginning how Abraham reacted to that. It said, "So Abram," who is also Abraham, "so Abram went." So Abram went. He just trusted God and went. And he had absolute faith in what God had told him. God had told him he's going to be a great nation. God had told him that he was going to give him this land, and that's what was going to happen. And Abraham just trusted him. God talked to Abraham about another promise as well in Genesis chapter 14. So if you want to turn to, Genesis chapter 15, if you want to turn there, verse 1 through 4, it says, After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." But Abram said, "Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer from Damascus." And Abraham said, "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." Then the word of the Lord came to him, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." He took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." So now he just continued with that promise. "Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation, so you need to go. And you know what? I am going to give you an heir of your own flesh and blood," he said. And what did Abraham do? What was his reaction to that? Well, we find out in verse 6 that Abraham believed the Lord. He just believed him. He trusted God and knew that this is what was going to happen. Well, it did take some time. From Genesis 12, when he first told Abraham that he was going to be a great nation, from that point to when Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah, it was 25 years. Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 91 years old, which was old to have a child. So 25 years. I don't know about you, but when I'm praying for something, it's really hard for me to wait. And 25 years is a long time. But Abraham still trusted God. And then he was given Isaac, his son, of his own flesh and blood. So I just think that is so amazing. He faithed it. He totally believed, trusted God, and had the faith. Let's turn to Genesis 22, because God is not done asking Abraham to have faith. He's not done asking him to show how much he trusts him. So in Genesis chapter 22, it says, "Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, 'Abraham.' 'Here I am,' he replied. Then God said, 'Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you.'" Okay. I don't know what Abraham was thinking, but I know what me, as a person who has a son, and I love him dearly, I don't want to sacrifice my son. But I also know that Abraham waited 25 years to have a son. He had the son when he was 100 years old, and here he is being asked to take Isaac and sacrifice him on the mountain that God will show him. What do you think his reaction is going to be? Yes, he absolutely faiths it. We find out in verse 3, "Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey." He didn't wait a week. He didn't wait 2 weeks. He didn't wait until the weather was kind of good or everything was kind of lined up and everything was right. He had immediate reaction because of his faith. So early the next morning, he went. Immediate reaction. He faithed it. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Faith. He said, "We will worship, and we will come back to you." If that's not trusting God, he didn't say, "and I will come back to you." He said, "we." He trusted God that he would be back with Isaac, and we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son, Isaac. He placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and a knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. Well, even then, he's still trusting, telling his son that God will provide. He's not sure what's going to happen, but he knows that he can trust God. There was a time that I had to take my son to surgery. And back in 2019, my son was diagnosed with Wolff-Parkinson's-White syndrome. He basically has an extra electrical heart pathway. And what it does is it's firing off his heart too fast. I know many of you remember at church he was wearing a heart monitor. It actually got it to show that his heart was beating at 260 beats per minute. So that was a lot. It was just firing off too fast. We were asked in February, we went to Stanford, and they wanted him to have a procedure where they could look at where that pathway was and hopefully fix it. They wanted to either burn it or freeze it out. Well, on that journey, as we drove from Fresno to Stanford, I was amazed by my son. He was looking out the window going, "Mom, look at this. Mom, look over here. Look at this view. It's beautiful. Mom, did you see this? Mom, look over here." I mean, he just wanted to point out everything. And on that way, he took pictures throughout the window of everything that he saw. And it made me think, how did Isaac react when he was traveling with Abraham? Was he saying, "Father, look at the tree. Father, look at this view. Father, look over here. Do you see this?" And what was going through Abraham's mind at this time? Was he excited and going through this journey with his son and just trusting God as he was going through? Because I can tell you, when I was driving, I was having to trust God. It was hard for me to take my son for this surgery. We arrived at Stanford, and we had a doctor's appointment when we first got there. And they told us what the procedure would look like, what the chances were of it being successful, and what the chances were of me losing my son. So that was really difficult, but okay, we got through that. We had a nice meal, we went back to the motel room. That next morning, I had to get up and get my son ready. I took him to the hospital. At the hospital, they asked me to get him into his surgical gown, and then they gave me these wipes. And I had to wash my son and wash his chest and wash areas and get him ready for surgery. And it was really an interesting process to get him ready. Then the doctors came in, they chatted with him and me briefly, and then they wheeled my son out. And that was very hard. As they wheeled him out, I remember the nurse turning around to me and saying, "It's okay, Mama, let it go." And the tears went. I let it go. So I wonder what Abraham felt like, because he now has to take his son. His son's carrying the wood, and they're going to the mountain that God showed him. And now he has to prepare his son. So let's go back to Genesis, and we will go to Genesis 22, verse 9. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac, and then he laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. I can't imagine what was going through his mind at that moment, to actually have to take the knife and prepare to kill your own son. Talk about faith. He absolutely had 100% trust in God. He was ready to do what God asked him to do. I can tell you, once I got it together after crying and I took my son out, I went to the chapel, and I put in my earbuds and I listened to Waymaker. I listened to Waymaker because it reminded me of who God was. So God is our Waymaker. He's our miracle worker. He is our promise keeper, and he is our light in the darkness. And I needed to remind myself of that at this very difficult time in this trial. Because if I don't remember that, then I'm not going to trust God. The next song I put on was Raise the Hallelujah. Because you know what? I had to listen to Raise the Hallelujah. I knew who my God was, and now it was time to worship for what he was about to do. I trusted him to protect my son. I trusted him to make sure that my son would come back to me and that we would return. Just like Isaac said, we will return. He trusted God. And he was so right doing it. He completely had faith. As we see here, what happened after he pulled the knife, then in verse 11, but the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. Guys, that's some powerful stuff. So, 2020, it has not been the most fantastic year. It has not been, come on. It's been pretty stinky, right? Oops, it's upside down. It's been pretty stinky. But you know what? We need to stop and we need to faith it. We need to faith it. We need to look at what we're supposed to do. We need to ask God to show us. Lord, show us. How are we supposed to obey? Lord, show us. How are we supposed to trust? Lord, show us what we need to do. Because if we don't faith it, we're not going to make it through. We must faith it. Because there are promises that God has given us. There's promises that he wants to fulfill. And we must faith it so he may fulfill those promises. I ask that you just take time this week and really look at what God has done in your life. Look at those moments in the past that you've had to trust him. Like I looked at mine, looking at where I was with my son in February, and looking at my kid now. No, he's not healed. Yes, he still has Wolff Parkinson's White syndrome, but I'm trusting God on all of that. Look at how God has been good to you. Look at how God has shown you his faithfulness and his love. That's what we need to do. We need to do that so we can remind ourselves of his goodness and we can faith it. Okay? Let's faith it. I want to pray with you guys right now. Let's go ahead and pray. And I want to pray for everything that's going on. I feel like with the fires and everything, there's a lot that's happening. So let's just pray. Heavenly Father, I ask right now that you just open our hearts, open our minds, open all of us to you. Let us just feel your presence, Father. Let us be reminded of how good you are and how you provide and how you want us to faith it, Lord. Let our faith rise and let it just keep rising so much, Lord. Let us see your goodness. Let us see your glory. Let us just know how we are supposed to trust you, Father, and how we are supposed to obey. when you ask us to do something, let us not put it off for a week or 2 weeks. Let us get up the next morning and do it just like Abraham, Father. Remind us what we need to do. Show us, Father. Lord, I ask that you help all those that are suffering from COVID. I ask that you put an end to this disease, Lord, because you are the only one with the power and authority to do it, Father. I ask that you help those that are fighting the fires. I ask that you help the families that are being displaced from the fires, Lord, because you are the one with the authority to do it, Father. I ask that you let it rain, Lord. Let it rain like we've never seen. Let us see the miracle, Father. I ask that you do what you do. Show us your glory, Lord. I ask, Father, that you just touch every single one that is watching this. Lord, just be with them. May your presence be with them, Father. I ask this in your name for your glory. Amen. Well, I will be seeing you guys soon on a kids video, and I will definitely see you Sunday. If you want, you can come in person at 10 a.m. and if not, we will be online at 10:30. I love you guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.